SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
In your headlines tonight, trust deficit. India Sri Lanka should build framework to discuss maritime security concerns like the Chinese satellite and missile tracking ship, says Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India. Upward revision. Sri Lanka state-run water supply and drainage board gets to implement tariff hike of 70% to domestic consumer categories to cover its operating costs with unpaid arrears totaling 8 billion rupees. Inefficient and incompetent. Energy Minister Kanchana Wijayasekara calls for immediate restructure to all state-owned enterprises, halving workforce in CPC, CEB and CPSTL as mismanagement and irregular political decisions take toll on efficiency and profitability. Climate catastrophe. Thousands told to evacuate as rivers rise in Pakistan, leaving 33 million people hit and nearly 1,000 dead since June. All this and much more coming up tonight, this Saturday, the 27th of August 2022.
වින්දියර මිලිලීටර් 100 ස්මාර්ට් පැක් එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on First at 9 on AdaDerana English, and I'm Indivari Amwat. Referring to the issue between Sri Lanka and India on the arrival of the controversial Chinese research and survey vessel Yuan Wang 5 to Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan High Commissioner in India Milinda Moragada said a question remains on how both countries can build a framework for such problems in order to avoid them in the future and not to allow such issues to lead to a trust deficit. The Sri Lankan envoy in India went on to say that despite ups and downs, Sri Lanka would like to build an equilibrium in relationship where there are no surprises. In an interview to the Hindu newspaper, Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India Milinda Moragada says Colombo has kept the Indian government briefed at the highest levels through the controversy of the Chinese satellite and missile tracking ship, the Yuan Wang 5. The High Commissioner said there could have been a level of confusion in Colombo when it came to differentiating between the classes of vessels and technologies involved, and unfortunately, once the approvals were given, it was difficult to retract them. Moragada said there is no question that the docking of the ship was an issue between Sri Lanka and India, but the question remains how to build a framework for such problems in order to avoid them in the future and not to allow such issues to lead to a trust deficit. The Sri Lankan envoy in India went on to say that despite ups and downs, Sri Lanka would like to build an equilibrium in the relationship where there are no surprises. He added that Sri Lanka is hoping to focus on strengthening lines of communication as well as high-level exchanges and people-to-people ties, adding it is important to look to the future of ties, particularly in terms of India-Sri Lanka cooperation in the economic and strategic sphere. The Hindu newspaper meanwhile reported that New Delhi and Colombo are discussing more trade ties, a power-sharing grid and infrastructure projects in renewable energy and oil storage. A special Gazette notification was issued by the Water Supply Minister effecting a 70% increase in tariffs from the 1st of September for all domestic consumer categories. Non-domestic categories, including hotels, will have their water tariffs increased by 40%. The National Water Supply and Drainage Board said hospitals and religious institutions were not subject to the electricity tariff revision. A water tariff revision of this extent happens after a decade. Earlier this year, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board sought an upward amendment in water tariffs to cover its operating costs with unpaid arrears of 8 billion rupees hitting cash flows. Since 2012, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board has been submitting proposals to increase water tariffs. However, earlier this month, the Cabinet of Ministers approved to increase water tariffs, citing it is essential to ensure an uninterrupted supply of water and the financial stability of the National Water Supply and Drainage Board. Last night, a Gazette Extraordinary was issued by Minister of Water Supply Keheliya Ramukwella on water tariffs. Accordingly, tariffs will be increased with effect from the 1st of September. Under the domestic category, consumption of up to 5 units will be charged 20 rupees per unit with a monthly service charge of 300 rupees, while the service charge will remain at 300 rupees for categories of consumption between 6 and 10 units, 11 and 15 units, 16 and 20 units, and 21 and 25 units, and the usage charge per unit will be 27, 34, 68 and 99 rupees respectively. Consumption of water between 26 and 30 units and 31 and 40 units will be charged 150 rupees and 179 rupees per unit respectively, with a monthly service charge of 900 rupees. The monthly service charge for consumption of 41 to 50 units and 51 to 75 units will be 2,400 rupees, and the charge per unit will be 204 rupees and 221 rupees respectively. Consumption above 75 units will be charged 238 rupees per unit and 3,500 rupees as the monthly service charge. Electricity bill and any other costs that are presently borne by the National Water Supply and Drainage Board on secondary pumping systems that were developed by the government organizations such as National Housing Development Authority, Urban Development Authorities to supply water to occupants of housing schemes shall be fully paid to the National Water Supply and Drainage Board by the occupants in addition to the water tariff.
Normally, we are billing based on basic two categories, domestic and non-domestic. Under the domestic category, there are three types of domestic customers: normal domestic customers, and Samurgi domestic, and the tenement domestic customers. Religious institutions, schools, there will be no change in existing tariff. Same rate applies to the religious and the schools. For the non-domestic customers, we have increased that rate from 40% to 50%, and minimum service charge will be 300 rupees. We are categorizing hotels under commercial category. Commercial category earlier 75 rupees, now it is 116 rupees. 40% increase, yes.
Plant 1 of the Norochole coal power plant was reconnected to the national grid last evening, which remained inoperative for nearly 2 weeks. A breakdown in the power plant denied the national grid 300 megawatts of electricity. Unit 1 of the Lakvijay power plant resumed operations after its generators underwent repairs. The Ceylon Electricity Board said 300 megawatts of electricity is now added to the national grid after recommencing functions. Owing to the malfunction, the duration of daily power interruptions too were extended to 3 hours. Meanwhile, due to the essential maintenance work of Unit 2 of the power plant, the national grid also lost another 270 megawatts of electricity. Accordingly, only Unit 3 was in operation until yesterday. Well, fuel queues are seen forming once again in Colombo and suburbs in the past few days. Energy Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara said that the lapse in distribution, delays in unloading and delays in payments for orders by filling stations have led to these long queues in the past few days. He said government plans to reduce the queues in the next couple of days by distributing additional stocks of all petroleum products across the island in the next 3 days. Following the official adoption of the National Fuel Pass QR code system island-wide earlier this month, long fuel queues near filling stations reduced gradually as fuel distribution became systematic. However, in the past few days, queues for fuel have once again gathered near filling stations. According to the subject minister, fuel queues are a result of lapses in fuel distribution, delays in unloading and delays in payments for orders by fuel stations. However, the minister said that fuel distribution was reviewed and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has been instructed to distribute additional stocks of all petroleum products island-wide in the next 3 days. Following that, the minister said that queues would reduce substantially in the next 2 days. Meanwhile, the Power and Energy Minister is of the view that all state-owned enterprises need immediate restructuring. Taking to his Twitter handle, Kanchana Vijayasekara said, irregular political appointments and decisions, misadministration and incompetence have led to the downfall of state-owned enterprises. Speaking on energy sector institutes, the subject minister said, while there are capable and efficient workforce at Ceylon Electricity Board, Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals, the majority are inefficient and incompetent, adding that a workforce of 500 instead of the present 4,200 should be able to do the job necessary and efficiently at both the CPC and CPTSL. He said just half of the 26,000 workforce at the Ceylon Electricity Board would be sufficient to do their job. While claiming that trade unions thrive on inefficient members of the workforce, the Energy Minister called for a change to introduce performance-based salaries as a must to keep these institutions profitable. And we have a revelation on a recent coal deal coming up after this break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back to the news. Minister of Public Security Derana English says the police will launch crackdown on underworld criminal activities in the country. The directive in this regard was given at a meeting carried out by the minister yesterday. The meeting was attended by Inspector General of Police C.D. Vikramaratne, DIG in charge of Western Province Deshabandhu Tenakon, Senior DIG Ajit Rohana in charge of Southern Province and other high-ranking police officers. The decision was made taking the rise in number of crimes in the country into consideration. The National Building Research Organisation issued landslide warnings this afternoon to several areas in the country as higher rainfall is expected during the day. Warnings have been issued to the Kegaul, Norelia and Ratnapura districts. According to the Department of Meteorology, fairly heavy rainfall of over 75 millimeters can be expected at some areas in the Sabaragamuwa province and in Kandy, Norelia, Gaul and Mathura districts. Showers or thunder showers are also forecast at several places elsewhere during evenings or nights. Taking you to business news, Sri Lanka has awarded a deal to supply coal to Ceylon Electricity Board on a 6-month credit facility. Energy Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara said a tender was awarded on the 26th of August to the lowest bid received for the procurement of coal for the Lakvijay power plant in Norochole. In a tweet, he said that due procurement process was followed with evaluation and approval from Standing Cabinet-appointed Procurement Committee and the SDEC. The minister's response came following the tweet of Samagi Jana Balawege MP Dr. Harsha De Silva quizzing whether Sri Lanka's largest procurement amounting to $1.477 billion to purchase 4.5 billion metric tons of coal on a 2-year term deal was awarded today to a company that was not even shortlisted by the tender committee, citing a newspaper article. The minister said supplier will provide 6 months credit facility from the date of supply of each shipment. Taking you to international business news, stock markets in the US ended the week sharply down following tough comments by the head of the country's central bank, the Federal Reserve. The bank's chairman, Jerome Powell, said the bank must continue to raise interest rates to stop inflation from becoming a permanent aspect of the US economy. During a highly anticipated speech at a conference on Friday, U.S. Central Bank Chief Jerome Powell said the Federal Reserve would probably impose further interest rate hikes in the coming months and could keep them high for some time. He said reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below-trend growth. His words sent U.S. stocks into a tailspin, with markets tumbling 3%. It comes as Americans are having to pay more for basic goods. Inflation in the world's largest economy is at a 4-decade high. Investors are concerned that if economic growth falters, higher interest rates will increase the likelihood of a recession. Powell conceded that getting inflation under control would come at a cost to American households and businesses, but he argued it was a price worth paying. In March, the Federal Reserve's key interest rates was almost zero. It has since been raised to a range of 2.25% to 2.5% in an effort to tackle inflation. Now, the vaccine manufacturing Moderna sued Pfizer and BioNTech, claiming that they copied groundbreaking technology used for COVID-19 vaccines that Moderna had developed years before the pandemic. The allegation of patient infringement set up what could become a protracted and expensive legal battle between the companies behind coronavirus vaccines used worldwide. In two lawsuits, Moderna claimed that Pfizer and its development partner BioNTech had infringed on 3 patents that Moderna filed between 2011 and 2016 related to its mRNA technology. One lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court in Massachusetts, where Moderna is based, and the other in Germany, home to BioNTech. Moderna is seeking damages which could include royalties and lost profits incurred since March, when the company said it would begin enforcing its COVID-related patents in wealthier countries after previously pledging not to do so during the pandemic emergency. Moderna's lawsuit said the company would not seek damages from Pfizer's sales of its shot to the world's poorest countries. Messenger RNA, abbreviated mRNA, is the genetic molecule that helps cells make proteins. The vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech and Moderna both use the technology to command cells to make tiny pieces of viruses that strengthen the immune system to protect against the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. That wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.